So patients thought they were getting FDA-approved tirzepatide, which is known as Mounjaro or Zepbound, and it was explicitly labeled not suitable for direct human consumption. I'm Dr. Kate D, founder and medical director of Glow MediSpa, and this is MedSpa Confidential, where we expose the risks, the red flags, and the outright illegal practices happening inside med spas right now, because you deserve to know the truth before you book. Today, we're going to talk about this Aurora IV and wellness case because the facts are pretty gross. The regulatory response is not great, and the pattern is all over the country. So what happened in Alabama? The Attorney General, Steve Marshall, announced a settlement mid-January of this year, 26. I'm not here to cast any shade on Coleman, Alabama, but what happened at Aurora is happening in med spas, suites, storefronts in every state in the country. And Aurora just happened to get caught. First of all, Aurora Mobile IV and Wellness, LLC, was a mobile and storefront IV clinic primarily. At its peak, it had 3 Alabama locations. The owners were Chris and Amanda Medders, residents of that county. Amanda is a licensed, or was a licensed registered nurse, and she ran the hands-on side. Chris was not a clinician. He ran operations and ordered supplies. They had a medical director, Dr. David Eckhart, MD. He was an anesthesiologist living in a different county, Madison County. And per Aurora's own website, he was supposed to oversee the medical staff and ensure cutting-edge safe care. The nurse practitioner at the clinic was also named in the lawsuit. Her name was Blair Gilliland. And the peptide supplier was a company called Vera Research, Inc. And their base is in Delaware, but I believe it's a foreign entity. And they sell semaglutide and tirzepatide as research-only chemicals for laboratory use only. The whistleblower was a nurse. She was brave, and she was a contractor who started in early 25, and she walked out of her job in October of 25 after physically watching another nurse pull one of these Vera-labeled vials out of a medication fridge to inject a patient. So what was actually being injected? Patients thought they were getting FDA-approved tirzepatide, which is known as Mounjaro or Zepbound, and semaglutide, which is Ozempic or Wegovy. Okay. But what they were actually getting starting around May of 25 was this gray market peptide powder reconstituted from Vera Research. And it was explicitly labeled for research and development, not suitable for direct human consumption. And also on the vial, it says not intended for clinical or therapeutic use. So that's what they were injecting in people. And according to the complaint, there were roughly 100 patients that were injected over about a 5-month period. And the patients reported headaches, fainting, swelling, and pain at the injection site. And one patient's syringe contents reportedly hardened into a gel that wouldn't pass through a needle. Okay, so how did they get caught? The whistleblower witnessed this other nurse drawing up this for laboratory use only. She confronted her. She got a confession, and then that nurse resigned the same day. So from there was a civil complaint, and then an investigation from the Attorney General of Alabama. And then this settlement was announced in January of 26, and Aurora itself filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So what the settlement actually did, it permanently closed Aurora. The 2 owners of the business are barred from any healthcare work involving direct patient treatment. Amanda Medders, who is the owner of this thing, surrendered her nursing license to the Alabama Board of Nursing. They paid a little over $17,000 in restitution to their patients and $7,000 to the state, which honestly, I think these numbers are very, very low. I think they probably are very lucky that they didn't have to pay more. The Attorney General was quoted as saying, "I think the permanent closure sends a very strong message that this conduct won't be tolerated in Alabama." So, strong message. Who's the strong message to? Because the only person who lost a license here was the wife, the nurse who owned the place. but the medical director? There's no reliable way to know if a med spa is following safety standards or cutting corners. Until now, the Med Spa Board certifies clinics that prove they're doing things right, verified products, licensed staff, and actual medical oversight. It's the difference between rolling the dice with your health and knowing exactly who's holding the needle. If you're looking for aesthetic treatments, go to medspaboard.com to find certified med spas near you. And if you already have a med spa you love and they're not certified, please send them our link. If you're a med spa owner doing things right, get certified and show your patients you're not cutting corners. As a bonus, certified spas also save a ton on malpractice insurance. Do the right thing and go to medspaboard.com. Keep listening, keep asking questions, and stay safe out there. Untouched, he still has an active license in Alabama. The nurse practitioner also still has an active license in Alabama. So what does research only mean? Well, Vera Research on its website describes its peptides as intended strictly for research and development work, not appropriate for human use, ingestion, or any medical or therapeutic application. So they explicitly say they're not a 503A compounding pharmacy, and they're not a 503B outsourcing facility. They're a commercial supplier with a disclaimer. Interesting, though, because this disclaimer is their whole business model. Who are they selling these peptides to? Let's be real, right? What kind of experimental semaglutide or tirzepatide, what would you do with it if not use it on a human? So it really makes this, peptide operation, somehow that disclaimer gets them off the hook. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So how this loophole actually works, when the FDA had GLP-1 medications on the drug shortage list, they were allowed to produce compounded semaglutide and tirzepatide on an emergency basis because the manufacturers that made those two peptides couldn't keep up with demand. They're really great drugs. No shade on semaglutide and tirzepatide, but for a while, it was about 2.5, 3 years, compounding pharmacies were making them. And then the manufacturers caught up. Those two drugs got taken off the emergency list. And so it was no longer legal to compound them. Now, a lot of people argue with that. So if there is an FDA-approved drug that is appropriate for your patient, then it's illegal to get it compounded elsewhere. But if your patient needs a different dose or a different formula or something, if you're a doctor and you think, oh gosh, this isn't working for my patient really needs an in-between dose or a smaller dose or a micro dose, people are talking about microdosing now, then it is legal to prescribe a compounded semaglutide or tirzepatide to that one particular patient if you can justify that based on their clinical situation. What's not legal is to offer that to everybody in your place from a compounded pharmacy. Once that shortage ended, everybody who was prescribing these drugs scrounged around, tried to figure out, well, how are we going to keep offering this? And some people went the legal route and some people went the illegal route. And so this is the illegal route, is buying these bulk peptides that are not for use in humans. So basically, Vera is catering to these people who are getting the illegal stuff. Okay. So on their credit card, it now says that they'll only sell to members, but basically anyone with a credit card and an email address can set up a account there. So if your peptide supplier accepts crypto and ships by the gram, you're probably not running a medical practice. You're running a chemistry experiment on your patients. So why does this matter if you think the peptides are basically the same? The problem is they're not. Okay, so pharmaceutical grade tirzepatide and semaglutide, they're sterile, they're identity tested, they're tested for potency, they're tested for contaminants and endotoxins, and they're traceable. They've got a lot number and an expiration number, and research grade powder is none of those things. Okay, and so if you get that, you have no idea what's in the vial. There could be bacteria in there, there could be mycoplasma there could be an entirely different compound altogether. You don't know what you're going to get. And that's why all these patients had these bad reactions to these laboratory grade drugs. So let's look at the consequences here. So Amanda Metters, the RN, she surrendered her license. Chris Metters, he never had a license, but he's barred from healthcare. Okay, that's fair. Aurora is dissolved in bankruptcy. Also fair. Dr. David Eckhard, anesthesiologist, he was the medical director on paper. As far as I can tell, as of today, which is mid-May of 26, he still has an active license. The nurse practitioner, Blair Gilliland, also has an active license. Now, it is possible they could suffer some consequences from this, but this settlement doesn't automatically trigger a medical board investigation. Every state's med spa rules ride on this idea that a physician medical director who supervises the practice, they're in charge, okay? That physician might visit once a month or never. It's what I call a ghost medical director. Aurora's own marketing said that Eckhard was overseeing the medical staff and ensuring cutting-edge safe care. So the complaint alleges that those staff were injecting these research chemicals into all these patients. So is the doctor responsible? Was he supervising them? Did he sign off on this? Or was he just collecting a paycheck? But either way, isn't he responsible in some way for this incident? In some ways, this is very similar to the pure indulgence case where the place got shut down, but the medical director, he still has his license. So there are two kinds of med spa medical directors, the ones who watch the practice and the ones who watch the deposit hit their checking account. The Aurora case doesn't tell which one Dr. Eckhart was, but the medical board's silence tells us Alabama doesn't really care to find out, at least for now. That will be public information if they do, but right now, there's nothing there. According to the complaint, the nurse practitioner at Aurora was the gateway. They did telehealth consults, prescribing decisions, sign-offs on the weight loss patients. So that's the whole point of the NP in that role, was to function as this good faith exam provider and the provider of record. And is she being investigated by the Board of Nursing? She still has an active license. So the license status as of this recording, they're both active. Either of these clinicians may face board action. The point isn't that they got away with it forever. The point is that 100 patients got injected with research chemicals, and the licensing system, which we depend on for medical safety in this country, fell short. And luckily, the whistleblower caught it and the regulators followed. So the Attorney General Marshall's framing Aurora falsely advertised their GLP-1 medications as pharmaceutical grade. And that's a deceptive trade practice angle. And that is a violation of consumer protection laws. But notice what wasn't charged, right? Practicing medicine without a license, distributing unapproved drugs, adulteration, conspiracy to defraud the FDA, reckless endangerment. None of those things. I think those are a lot harder to prove. The civil complaint that was filed, that was dropped, includes pretty heavy stuff: the wantonness, the fraud, the intentional infliction of emotional distress, because private plaintiffs can plead it. Attorney generals are very focused on consumer protection. So even though there are much bigger, egregious problems with practicing medicine without a license and potentially killing someone, harming someone, giving someone an infection, I mean, essentially that's assault, right? But it's much, much harder to prove those things. I think that making the case for false advertising is a lot easier. All you need to prove that is to show the marketing copy, showing that they were advertising real Ozempic or real Zepbound, and then a syringe that shows that it wasn't. So that's way easier to prove. I think that's why Aurora got dinged that way. But either way, the place is shut down. Aurora's defense lawyer leaned all the way in. He said, this is a quote from him: "This controversy centered on website phrasing and the content of consent forms, issues our clients were prepared to correct promptly had they been given a pre-suit opportunity to do so." That was their lawyer, Carson T. Perot. And I just think that's hilarious, because there's no acknowledgement there that they were ordering these illegal compounds and injecting it into people, like nothing. They were just saying, hey, we could have just relabeled the website to say that we weren't giving them real Ozempic. I do think that's pretty funny. I want to warn everyone that this kind of thing is rampant in the med spa industry. Aurora is not exotic. Pieces of the Aurora playbook you can find at thousands of med spas right now. There's an absentee medical director. There's an NP as the prescriber of record who doesn't actually do the injecting. There's a peptide by the gram supply that is not fit for human injection. There's this mobile IV business, which I also think is a problem because that means, there's a nurse on a van going from door to door. And they also had a fee splitting setup, which is also illegal. Very, very common, right? So I just want you to keep in mind, if you're a patient and you want either weight loss medications or any of the new peptides that are really popular right now, ask to see the vial and make sure it's got an actual lot number on it and that it is what it says. You're not going to recognize the label, but you can at least see that there's a lot number. And if you're seeing an NP or an RN or an MD, ask to look up their license and make sure they actually have a license to practice medicine. And always remember, if you see a nurse and never ever see at least a nurse practitioner or a PA or a doctor, that nurse is practicing medicine without a license. That's also a felony. And if you are an NP or an RN working at one of these clinics, you really need to take that professional liability seriously. And if you're a physician thinking about becoming a medical director as a side gig for Mailbox Money, think again, because not only could you be responsible for people getting sick, but as we know from the Jennifer Cleveland case in Texas, you could ultimately be behind bars. So really, the headline of this story is clinic is shut down, owner pays $24,000, but the actual story is 100 people got injected with something that could have been a lot worse. It made them sick, but it didn't kill them. I personally think that we should be staying away from any place like this. There are really great med spas. I'm not knocking my entire industry here, okay? But legit med spas that have an actual medical director and licensed individuals and are getting real product and they're actually helping patients. Make sure you go to one of those. Check the Med Spa Board website. And if your favorite med spa is not on there, ask them to get certified because we have momentum now. And we have a benefit package that way more than offsets the cost of getting certified, including a discount on malpractice insurance now. And why is that? Because the malpractice insurance companies are willing to cover the legit places. They do not want to cover these places that are doing illegal, shady things. They're going to have to jump in and defend them in some cases if they get sued like this. So always look at the vial, always check those licenses and keep the Med Spa Board in mind. Go get certified. Thanks for listening. If this episode opened your eyes to something you didn't know before, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And drop a comment telling me your biggest takeaway. I actually read them all. Join me on this mission to keep you safe and push this industry to do better.